Have you ever wondered why some people walk alone? Not because they were left behind, but because they quietly chose the path of solitude? Why some souls move through this noisy world with calm eyes, carrying a silence that speaks louder than any crowd? If you've ever felt that strange distance between you and the rest of the world, this message is for you. Stay until the very end, because what you'll discover might just change the way you see yourself forever. We live in a time where being surrounded by people is seen as a sign of success. The more friends you have, the more liked you seem, the happier you must be. But what if that's an illusion? What if the people who walk alone aren't lonely at all, but simply awake? What if solitude isn't emptiness, but a form of power? People who don't have many friends are often misunderstood. Others might whisper that they're antisocial, arrogant, or too serious. But the truth is, these individuals often carry something rare, a quiet strength that doesn't seek approval. They don't fill the silence with noise because they're not afraid of it. They've learned that the most important conversations in life happen within, not around them. There's a deep psychology behind those who choose solitude. Studies show that emotionally mature people often prefer fewer relationships because they value depth over volume. Their hearts no longer crave attention. They crave authenticity. They don't want people who simply occupy space in their life. They want people who add meaning to it. And until they find that, they are not afraid to walk alone. But this isn't always easy. Being different comes with a price. When you start to understand yourself, you begin to see through the surface of things. And that's when people begin to misunderstand you. They call your peace coldness. They confuse your silence for sadness. They label your independence as pride. And slowly, you learn that not everyone deserves access to your energy. Maybe you've been there, the one who listens more than you speak, the one who feels deeply but finds it hard to express, the one who'd rather stay home reading, thinking, or dreaming instead of drowning in meaningless talk. You might have wondered, what's wrong with me? Why can't I connect like others do? But here's the truth. There's nothing wrong with you. In fact, your mind works on a different frequency, one that not everyone can tune into. Psychology calls this high self-awareness. It's when you understand yourself so clearly that superficial relationships no longer satisfy you. You crave conversations that awaken your soul, not gossip that drains it. You desire loyalty, not company. You look for alignment, not entertainment. And because of this, your circle becomes smaller, but more honest. The irony is, people who walk alone often have the biggest hearts. They've been through things that taught them to trust carefully. They know what it feels like to be betrayed, used, or misunderstood. So now they guard their peace. Not because they've stopped caring, but because they finally understand that peace is priceless. You see, there comes a point in life when your energy becomes sacred. You start realizing that every time you give your time, your emotion, your presence, you're giving a piece of your life that you'll never get back. That's why people who've learned this truth don't just spend their energy, they invest it. And they invest it wisely. That's what makes them appear distant. But they're not distant. They're selective. They're not lonely. They're focused. They've stopped chasing validation because they've found something more powerful than acceptance, inner peace. And when you reach that stage, silence becomes your friend. Solitude becomes your strength. So if you've ever felt alone, remember this. Solitude is not punishment. It's preparation. It's the phase where the universe refines you, strengthens you, and teaches you who you truly are. It's where you shed the noise of the world and rediscover your own voice. Most people fear being alone because they haven't met themselves yet. But once you do, you'll realize that your own company is the most peaceful place you'll ever find. You'll stop begging for attention. You'll stop explaining yourself to people who never listen. You'll stop lowering your standards just to belong. Because once you know your worth, you'll no longer sit at tables where love has to be begged for. So, if you're still watching this, take a deep breath. You're not behind, you're not broken, you're just in the quiet season of your life. The season where your spirit is learning strength, patience, and peace. And when the time is right, the right souls will find you, not because you chase them, but because your energy will attract what truly matches your heart. Stay until the end of this video, because we're about to uncover the 5 powerful personality traits that explain why people like you, the ones who walk alone, are not weak, but deeply evolved. These traits might reveal the truth you've been waiting to hear about yourself. Because sometimes walking alone isn't a curse. It's the universe preparing you for the kind of connections that only a strong, awakened soul can handle. When someone walks through life alone, the world tends to judge before it understands. People see a quiet face and assume sadness. They see a calm heart and mistake it for emptiness. Yet beneath that still surface lies something the world rarely notices, a strength built in silence. Those who don't have many friends are not broken souls wandering aimlessly. They are observers, thinkers, and deep feelers who move differently through life. You see, society teaches us to measure our worth by how many people we can gather around us. But genuine souls have learned that connection is not a number. It's a vibration. It's not about how many people you know, but how deeply you can be known. The fewer friends they have, the more real their lives become. Every bond that remains is filtered through truth, not convenience. There's a special kind of awareness that grows inside people who walk alone. They begin to see through masks. The fake smiles, the shallow conversations, the forced laughter. They feel when energy is off, even if words say otherwise. Their intuition sharpens, their vision deepens, and because they sense what others hide, they pull back. They'd rather keep their distance than drown in dishonesty. Psychologically, this kind of solitude creates resilience. When you stop relying on others to validate your emotions, you begin to regulate them yourself. You stop reacting, and you start reflecting. You stop seeking attention, and you start protecting your peace. It's not that they can't make friends. It's that they no longer settle for connections that drain their spirit. There's beauty in that. Because when you can sit alone and still feel complete, no one can use loneliness against you. The world loses its power to shake your core. You become your own source of peace. That's why people with fewer friends often move with quiet confidence. They may not talk much, but when they do, their words carry weight. They don't need to prove who they are. Their presence says it all. But make no mistake, this kind of strength doesn't come without pain. It's built from disappointments, betrayals, and nights where they question their worth. They've known what it feels like to be there for everyone and have no one there for them. They've loved people who vanished when times got dark. And through that pain, they discovered something powerful. That solitude is safer than pretending. So while others chase company just to avoid their own thoughts, these people have learned to face themselves. They've sat in silence long enough to understand their fears, their flaws, their triggers, and their truth. And once you reach that level of self-understanding, you realize that not everyone deserves access to you. The world might call them friendless, but in truth, they are free. Free from drama, free from lies, free from the pressure to perform. They don't seek to be liked. They seek to be real. And that, in a world full of noise, is the rarest kind of peace. When you begin to truly understand yourself, something profound happens. The noise around you begins to fade. You no longer feel the urge to fit in, to please, or to prove. You start seeing life differently, almost like watching it from a higher place. This is the quiet gift of self-awareness, and it's the first trait shared by people who don't have many friends. High self-awareness means you've met yourself deeply. You've looked within and faced both your light and your shadows. You know what brings you peace and what destroys it. You know when to speak and when silence is wiser. You recognize when someone's presence is healing you and when it's draining you. And because of that clarity, you naturally become more selective about who you let into your world. It's not arrogance, it's wisdom. Self-aware people understand that every interaction shapes their energy. They can't afford to surround themselves with people who confuse them, criticize their peace, or pull them into drama. They've learned through experience that not every smile is genuine, not every friend is loyal, and not every connection deserves a seat at their table. There's a certain peace that comes from knowing yourself. It allows you to walk away from anything that doesn't align with your values. You stop explaining why you need space. You stop apologizing for saying no. You stop chasing people who make you question your worth. Because when you truly know yourself, you stop negotiating your peace just to keep others comfortable. Psychologically, self-awareness is one of the strongest signs of emotional maturity. It's what separates those who act from impulse from those who act from understanding. It makes you pause before reacting, reflect before speaking, and heal before blaming. And that level of control, that calmness in the middle of chaos, is something most people can't handle. That's why they label you distant. They don't see the inner strength behind your silence. When you're self-aware, you also begin to notice how rare authenticity has become. You see how often people wear masks to be accepted. You feel the pain behind their laughter, the insecurity behind their confidence, and while your heart is compassionate, you also know that you can't save everyone. Some people must face their own silence before they can meet you where you are. This kind of awareness changes your relationships. You stop expecting others to understand you completely. You accept that some will misinterpret your peace as pride, your calmness as indifference, but you no longer take it personally. You know that your energy isn't meant for everyone. It's meant for those who resonate with truth. That's why people with high self-awareness often walk alone, not because they reject others, but because they refuse to reject themselves. They've made peace with who they are. And that's a friendship no crowd can replace. Once a person becomes deeply self-aware, solitude no longer feels like loneliness. It feels like home. The world may see silence as emptiness, but for those who've grown beyond the need for constant company, silence becomes a form of power. It's in solitude that the mind sharpens, the heart heals, and the soul begins to speak in its own language. There's a calm that only comes when you spend time with yourself. You begin to understand that peace doesn't come from the outside, it blooms quietly within. You realize that every moment alone is not wasted time, it's a sacred meeting with your truest self. This is where emotional balance begins to grow. Without the noise of others' opinions, you start to hear your own truth clearly. Psychologists say that people who are comfortable being alone develop higher emotional intelligence. They're better at understanding their emotions, managing their reactions, and making decisions rooted in clarity rather than pressure. They don't run from solitude. They use it to recharge, to reflect, and to realign with what truly matters. There's a difference between isolation and solitude. Isolation is when you feel trapped in your own mind. Solitude is when you are finally free inside it. It's a space where you stop performing for the world. You don't have to smile to make others feel comfortable. You don't have to pretend to be okay when you're not. You can simply exist, raw, real, and unfiltered. People who have found strength in solitude often notice something extraordinary. Their intuition becomes sharper. They sense things before they happen. They can feel when energy shifts, when truth hides behind words, and when peace is being disturbed. They move through life with awareness, not fear. Their calmness is not weakness, it's control. But solitude doesn't come easy. It's forged through the fire of experiences that once made you question everything. Nights where you sat alone wondering if you were the problem. Days where you waited for calls that never came. Moments where silence felt unbearable. Yet over time you learned something profound. You never needed those voices to feel whole. That's when solitude transforms from punishment to privilege. It teaches you how to love yourself without conditions, how to sit with your pain until it becomes wisdom, and how to turn emptiness into strength. You stop looking for people to complete you, because you realize you were never incomplete. People who embrace solitude move differently. They carry quiet confidence. They don't rush because they trust their timing. They don't beg because they trust their worth. They've discovered that when you find peace within, no one can take it away. And that realization that your calm is your power becomes the foundation of everything they do. Solitude is not a void. It's a mirror that shows who you really are. Those who learn to love it no longer fear being alone because they've learned the most important truth of all. You can never be lonely when you're at peace with yourself. When a person grows comfortable in solitude, something powerful begins to awaken within them. A refusal to lie to themselves or to others. They no longer bend their truth just to be accepted. They no longer pretend to be fine when they're not. This is where the second defining trait emerges: intense honesty. People who don't have many friends often live with a rare kind of transparency. Their hearts cannot tolerate pretense. They say what they mean and mean what they say. They have no energy for fake smiles, half-truths, or relationships built on comfort instead of authenticity. This level of honesty can be intimidating because it exposes what others try to hide. You see, most people wear masks to survive in a world that rewards conformity. They say what others want to hear, even if it means betraying what they truly feel. But for deeply self-aware and solitary souls, dishonesty feels heavy. It suffocates them. They would rather be alone with their truth than surrounded by people who celebrate lies. Intense honesty is not about being harsh. It's about being real. It's the courage to speak when silence would be easier. It's the strength to admit your flaws instead of pretending to be perfect. It's the discipline to tell the truth, even when it costs you comfort. This kind of honesty can make people uncomfortable, And that's exactly why those who live this way often walk alone. Psychologically, people with strong integrity experience both pain and peace. The pain comes from losing connections with those who can't handle their truth. The peace comes from knowing that whatever remains is real. They no longer have to guess who truly cares, because the false ones have already left. There's something magnetic about honest people. Their energy feels clean. You can sense it when they speak. There's no manipulation behind their words, no hidden motives behind their kindness. Their honesty commands respect, even from those who can't match it, because deep down, everyone craves the truth, but few have the courage to live it. Being honest also means being vulnerable. It means showing your scars without shame. It means saying, "I'm not okay," when the world expects you to smile. This kind of openness requires strength, not weakness. It's the kind of strength that builds real self-respect, the kind that doesn't depend on approval. But honesty comes with a cost. When you stop pretending, you start losing people who loved your mask. You begin to see who valued your presence and who valued your silence. And though that realization hurts, it also frees you. Because once you know who's real, you no longer fear being alone. That is the paradox of honesty. It may isolate you from the crowd, but it connects you more deeply to yourself. And once you find peace in your truth, no amount of loneliness can make you betray it again. The price of intense honesty is often misunderstanding. When you start living in truth, people begin to misread your silence, your boundaries, and your directness. They call you distant when you're simply protecting your peace. They say you've changed when you've just outgrown what no longer aligns with your soul. That's the quiet pain carried by those who value truth over approval. They are rarely understood by the world around them. People who live honestly don't sugarcoat their emotions. They speak from depth, not from convenience. Yet this very transparency can make others uncomfortable. The world has become used to polite lies, smiles that hide disappointment, words that avoid discomfort, relationships built on pretending. When someone appears who refuses to play that game, it shakes people. They don't know how to respond to a person who chooses authenticity over acceptance. The misunderstood often walk through life feeling unseen. Their intentions are pure, but their truth is sharp. Their words may sound blunt, but they come from a heart that refuses to deceive. They don't raise their voice to be heard. They speak quietly, with clarity, and move on. And in that stillness, others project their own insecurities onto them. What people can't understand, they often judge. Psychologically, being misunderstood can be one of the hardest forms of loneliness. It's not about being without people. It's about being surrounded yet unseen. These individuals crave depth, but most conversations stay on the surface. They value loyalty, but many people only offer convenience, and so they withdraw. Not because they dislike others, but because the noise of false connection drains their spirit faster than solitude ever could. There's a kind of silent suffering that comes with being the one who feels too much or thinks too deeply. You watch people take things lightly that mean the world to you. You notice details others ignore. You sense lies even when they're wrapped in smiles. And because you can't pretend not to see, you end up alone. Not by rejection, but by choice. But here's the hidden truth. Being misunderstood isn't a curse. It's a sign of depth. It means your frequency is rare and not everyone can tune into it. It means you think, feel, and live from a place beyond superficial noise. It means you've stopped lowering your truth just to make others comfortable. And while that kind of isolation can feel heavy, it also becomes your greatest teacher. Over time, you begin to realize that not everyone is meant to understand you. Some people are only meant to misunderstand you, so you can learn how to stay rooted in your truth despite their confusion. You stop explaining yourself to those who don't want to listen. You stop proving your worth to those who've already decided not to see it. Eventually, misunderstanding no longer hurts. It liberates you. Because once you accept that not everyone will get you, you also accept that the right ones will never need to try. They'll simply feel your truth and understand it without words. When a person learns to accept being misunderstood, they begin to see their emotions, not as a burden, but as a form of wisdom. This marks the third defining trait of those who walk through life with few friends: emotional depth. These individuals feel life in layers. Every experience, every word, every silence touches them differently. They don't skim the surface of existence, they dive into it. Emotional depth means they process things most people overlook. A short conversation might stay in their mind for hours. A small act of kindness can move them to tears. They notice shifts in tone, hidden meanings behind words, and the emotions that others try to hide. It's not that they overthink, it's that they overfeel. Their hearts are tuned to a frequency where everything carries weight and meaning. This depth is both a blessing and a challenge. It allows them to connect with life in a way few can, but it also makes the world feel too loud, too fast, and too shallow. Most people move through emotions quickly, brushing off pain or joy as if they're just passing moments. But for emotionally deep souls, feelings linger. They don't just experience emotions, they absorb them. Psychologists say that emotionally intense individuals often have higher empathy and sensitivity. They can sense what others feel, sometimes even before words are spoken. This makes them excellent listeners, healers, and thinkers. Yet it also leaves them vulnerable to emotional exhaustion. Because they give so much, they often receive little in return. They love deeply, but not everyone can handle love that powerful. This depth is the reason many of them have few friends. Shallow connections feel like walking in cold water, uncomfortable, meaningless, and draining. They crave conversations that reach the soul, not just the surface. They long for people who can sit with silence, who can talk about growth, pain, and purpose without fear. But in a world obsessed with distraction, that kind of connection is rare. Their emotions also make them more introspective. They spend time reflecting, journaling, or simply sitting with their thoughts. They question everything, their choices, their relationships, their path. They're not trying to be dramatic. They're just wired to seek meaning. Every heartbreak becomes a lesson. Every disappointment becomes fuel for growth. Where others see endings, they see transformation. Yet their emotional depth can sometimes isolate them. People mistake their quietness for sadness or their seriousness for coldness. But in truth, they're simply living in a deeper dimension, one where authenticity matters more than attention. They don't need crowds to feel alive. They find beauty in stillness, poetry in pain, and clarity in solitude. To be emotionally deep is to live with an open heart in a world that often celebrates numbness. It's to love even when it hurts, to feel even when it's easier not to, and to hope even when the world seems unkind. It's a rare gift, one that shapes the soul into something unbreakable, because it's built from both the beauty and the weight of truly feeling everything. Emotional depth carries a certain kind of energy, powerful, magnetic, and often overwhelming to those who live on the surface. It's the kind of energy that can light up a room without saying a word. Yet, it's also the reason why people who possess it often find themselves standing alone. Their presence doesn't go unnoticed. It simply can't be easily understood. When someone has this kind of energy, it reflects truth. It's not loud, but it's strong. It doesn't seek attention, but it draws it naturally. And because this energy is built on authenticity, it exposes what's false around it. That's why emotionally deep people often repel those who are not ready to face themselves. They act as mirrors, and not everyone is ready to look into a mirror that reveals their own hidden emotions. People sense when someone's energy is pure. They can't explain it, but they feel it. Some are drawn to it. They feel safe, seen, and understood. Others are threatened by it. They feel small, judged, or exposed. It's not the deep person's fault. It's simply the vibration they carry. Their calmness unsettles those who depend on chaos. Their peace challenges those who thrive on drama. Their silence feels heavy to those who fear self-reflection. Psychologically, this is what's called energetic projection. When someone encounters a person who radiates depth, their own insecurities surface. They start to project discomfort, blame, or even dislike, not because the other person did anything wrong, but because they've stirred something sleeping inside them. This is why people with deep emotional energy often end up misunderstood or avoided. Yet, this same energy is also what makes them unforgettable. Even if people walk away, they remember how they felt in their presence. They remember the comfort, the truth, or even the discomfort they couldn't name. Because true energy, calm, grounded, and authentic, leaves an imprint on the soul. It cannot be faked, and it cannot be forgotten. But carrying such energy isn't easy. It requires constant cleansing, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. That's why these people value solitude. It's their way of recharging, of releasing all the emotions they unconsciously absorb from others. Their alone time isn't isolation, it's healing. It's how they maintain their balance in a world that constantly pulls at their spirit. Over time, they learn that not everyone can walk with them, and that's okay. They stop chasing understanding and start attracting alignment. They realize that their energy doesn't need to be explained, only protected. They stop apologizing for being too much because they finally understand that too much is exactly what the right people will need one day. Their presence becomes quiet power, the kind that doesn't demand attention, but commands respect. They may walk alone, but they walk with grace. Because when your energy is rooted in truth, you no longer need the world to understand you. You simply need the courage to keep shining, even when your light makes others uncomfortable. Once a person understands the weight of their own energy, they begin to value something far greater than attention: emotional independence. It's a state where peace no longer depends on how others act, speak, or treat you. Instead, it flows from an inner knowing that your worth is not up for negotiation. This shift is subtle yet transformative. It's when you stop chasing validation and start embodying self-respect. Emotional independence isn't about being cold or detached. It's about standing firm in your emotional truth. It means you can feel deeply without being consumed, care without losing yourself, and love without begging for reciprocation. It's the point where you understand that people's behavior towards you is a reflection of them, not a measure of your value. When someone reaches this level of maturity, their reactions change. They no longer rush to explain themselves when misunderstood. They no longer get angry when ignored. They simply observe, process, and release. Their silence becomes a language, one that says, "I no longer need to prove who I am." That calmness confuses those who once relied on your emotional reactions to feel in control. They realize they can no longer manipulate what they cannot disturb. Psychologically, this represents emotional regulation, the ability to manage your internal state regardless of external triggers. It's one of the strongest indicators of emotional intelligence. People with this trait are not emotionless. They've just mastered the art of feeling everything without being ruled by anything. They understand that peace is not found by controlling others, but by controlling one's response to them. This kind of emotional autonomy naturally creates a powerful boundary, not the kind that walls people out, but the kind that filters energy. It separates what nourishes the soul from what drains it. You start recognizing that not every connection deserves your emotional investment. Some people only connect to feed off your calmness, to draw energy they can't create within themselves. Emotional independence teaches you when to hold space and when to walk away. There's a deep beauty in this transformation. You no longer wait for closure, you create it. You no longer depend on others to make you feel seen, you see yourself. You begin to realize that true strength isn't found in how much pain you can endure for others, but in how much peace you can protect for yourself. With time, life starts to feel lighter. You move slower but with more clarity. You talk less but say more. You attract fewer people but deeper connections. And most importantly, you stop feeling guilty for choosing yourself. Because emotional independence isn't selfish, it's sacred. It's the foundation upon which all healthy love, purpose, and growth are built. When your happiness no longer comes from being understood, you finally begin to understand yourself. And that is the most peaceful feeling a soul can ever experience. When emotional independence takes root, solitude no longer feels like a punishment. It becomes a sacred gift. You begin to realize that being alone is not the same as being lonely. Loneliness comes from a lack of connection with others, but solitude comes from a deep connection with yourself. It's the space where your thoughts stop competing with the noise of the world, and your heart finally gets the chance to speak. Most people fear solitude because they've never met themselves outside of distraction. They rely on constant interaction to feel alive, to feel validated, to escape their own thoughts. But those who embrace solitude find a different kind of energy, one that doesn't fade when people leave. It's the energy of peace, self-knowledge, and alignment. They begin to see that silence is not empty, it's full of answers. In solitude, the mind begins to reorganize itself. The unnecessary noise dissolves, and clarity takes its place. You start noticing what truly matters and what you were only clinging to out of fear. Every minute spent alone becomes a moment of healing, a quiet reintroduction to who you are without external influence. You start remembering your forgotten passions, dreams that once excited you before the world told you who you should be. Psychologically, solitude activates introspection, the ability to analyze your emotions, choices, and desires without bias. It helps regulate stress, strengthen focus, and build emotional resilience. People who master solitude no longer depend on external sources of happiness because they've learned to generate joy internally. This makes them powerful in a way that can't be seen but can always be felt. There's something magnetic about someone who enjoys their own company. They carry an aura of peace that draws others in, not because they're trying to attract, but because peace itself is rare and desirable. They don't chase attention, they attract presence. They don't fear silence, they create from it. Solitude becomes the soil in which purpose grows, where the soul recharges and wisdom expands. The truth is, solitude tests you before it transforms you. In the beginning, it can feel uncomfortable, like standing in front of a mirror with nowhere to run. You see your fears, your regrets, your insecurities, but if you stay long enough, that mirror starts reflecting strength, confidence, and clarity. You begin to understand that the time you spend alone is not wasted, it's invested. And once you've tasted the peace that solitude brings, you stop allowing chaos to rent space in your life. You protect your silence the way others protect their possessions. You start saying no more often, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. You learn that sometimes the best way to connect with the world is to first disconnect from it. Because the truth is simple. Solitude doesn't isolate you from life. It prepares you for it. It's where your soul learns to stand tall, even when no one is clapping. When solitude becomes familiar, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see yourself clearly for the first time. Without the influence of others, without the noise of external opinions, your inner truth rises to the surface. You start noticing your patterns, your habits, your triggers, and your strengths. This is the birth of deep self-awareness, the quiet understanding of who you truly are beneath all roles and masks. Self-awareness is not about judging yourself, it's about witnessing yourself. It's realizing that your emotions are messages, not enemies, that your reactions tell stories about your unhealed wounds, that your choices reveal what you value most. People who have few friends often spend more time reflecting, and through that reflection, they develop a level of self-understanding most never reach. Psychologically, this awareness creates a strong internal compass. It gives direction where confusion once lived. It helps you recognize when something feels right, even if it doesn't make sense to others, and when something feels wrong, even if it looks good from the outside. It's what allows you to walk away from what no longer serves you, not with anger, but with peace. When you know yourself deeply, you stop betraying yourself for acceptance. You no longer say yes when your soul screams no. You stop adjusting your personality to fit rooms that shrink your spirit. You learn to honor your truth, even if it makes you stand alone. That's real strength. Not the ability to carry more, but the wisdom to let go of what isn't aligned. Self-awareness also brings emotional clarity. You begin to see why certain people drain you, and why some situations trigger your insecurities. You start understanding your needs on a deeper level, the kind of love you crave, the peace you need, the boundaries that keep you safe, and as you gain this clarity, your energy changes. You stop chasing connections that are built on confusion. You start attracting those who vibrate at your level of authenticity. This kind of inner understanding is powerful because it makes you unshakable. You no longer rely on validation from others because you already validate yourself. You no longer seek approval because you approve of who you are becoming. You don't fear rejection because you realize what's meant for you can't be taken away. You carry yourself differently, not with arrogance, but with quiet confidence that speaks louder than words. The most beautiful part of deep self-awareness is that it brings compassion, not just for others, but for yourself. You stop resenting your past and start learning from it. You stop punishing yourself for your mistakes and begin to see them as lessons that shaped your strength. You realize you were never broken, just buried under expectations and noise. And as you continue to grow in this awareness, you start walking through life with calm eyes and an open heart. You no longer chase meaning, you live it. You no longer seek peace, you become it. When self-awareness deepens, you begin to understand the quiet necessity of emotional boundaries. You realize that peace is not only found in solitude, but also in the courage to protect your energy when you re-enter the world. Boundaries are not walls built out of fear, they are gates guarded by wisdom. They are the invisible lines that define where you end and where others begin. People who have few friends often learn this truth the hard way. They've felt what it's like to give too much, to care too deeply, to pour endlessly into others who never pour back. Through those experiences, they discover that love without limits often leads to emptiness. Setting boundaries doesn't make you unkind, it makes you conscious. It's an act of self-respect that says, my energy is precious and I choose where to place it. Boundaries protect emotional balance. They stop you from overextending yourself, from saying yes when your heart says no, and from allowing guilt to guide your decisions. They help you see that you're not responsible for fixing everyone's pain. You're only responsible for managing your own. Psychologically, this shift marks the transition from codependence to independence. It's when you stop defining your worth by how useful you are to others and start defining it by how true you are to yourself. When you set healthy boundaries, you begin to attract different kinds of people. Those who are used to taking without giving may fall away, but those who value honesty and mutual respect will step closer. You start building relationships that feel lighter, more balanced, and real. The conversations deepen, not because you're trying harder, but because you've removed the need to please. You no longer measure connection by quantity, but by quality, by how seen and safe you feel in someone's presence. Strong emotional boundaries also bring peace to your inner world. You stop explaining your worth to people committed to misunderstanding it. You stop fighting for validation from those who only listen to reply. You learn the art of walking away, not in anger, but in quiet assurance that your peace is non-negotiable. That calm detachment is not coldness. It's wisdom born from experience. There's a quiet strength in those who can say, I wish you well, but I choose peace. It's the strength of someone who knows that self-love sometimes looks like distance. It's the strength of someone who understands that not every invitation deserves a response, and not every battle is worth fighting. Boundaries remind you that your energy is sacred, and it must be guarded with the same devotion you give to your dreams. And when you finally honor those boundaries, life starts aligning in ways you never expected. You stop living in reaction to others and start living in reflection of yourself. You become grounded, calm, and untouchable, not because the world around you changed, but because you learned to protect the world within you. When emotional boundaries become a natural part of your life, something even more powerful awakens within you: self-trust. It's the confidence that comes not from approval, but from knowing that you can rely on yourself. It's the peace that arises when you no longer question your instincts, when you stop second-guessing your choices, and when you finally realize that the voice within you was right all along. Self-trust is the foundation of true confidence. It's not loud or boastful. It doesn't need to announce itself or prove its worth. It moves quietly, gracefully, with the calm assurance that no matter what happens, you will handle it. People who walk alone often develop this kind of trust naturally. They've learned to make decisions without the safety net of constant reassurance. They've faced moments of uncertainty and found their way through, guided only by intuition and perseverance. When you trust yourself, fear loses its control. You stop hesitating when opportunities arise because you know you're capable of adapting, learning, and growing. You no longer wait for perfect conditions, you create them. You stop overthinking and start doing. And even when you stumble, you don't collapse in doubt, you rise with understanding. That's the quiet power of someone who believes in their own strength. Psychologically, self-trust is one of the deepest forms of emotional maturity. It's built from consistency, from showing up for yourself again and again, even when no one is watching. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, every time you honor your boundaries, every time you choose growth over comfort, you strengthen that inner bond. And over time, that bond becomes unbreakable. The world respects those who trust themselves because it can sense it. You carry a different energy, one that says, I may not know what's ahead, but I trust myself enough to face it. This energy attracts respect, stability, and admiration. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. You begin to walk with quiet confidence, speak with clarity, and act with conviction. You no longer need to convince anyone of your worth because your life reflects it. Self-trust also heals the fear of rejection. You stop clinging to what's leaving and start trusting that what's meant for you will find you. You stop depending on others for direction because you've become your own guide. And with that shift, your peace deepens. Because nothing feels safer than knowing that you have your own back. The beauty of self-trust is that it transforms uncertainty into adventure. You stop fearing the unknown and start embracing it as a space where growth lives. You realize that no matter how many times life breaks you, you'll rebuild stronger, because you trust the hands that will do the rebuilding, your own. And in that realization lies the kind of freedom that few ever experience, the freedom to live boldly, love deeply, and walk your path without fear of losing yourself along the way. When self-trust becomes your foundation, life begins to soften in unexpected ways. You stop fighting so hard to control everything. You stop resisting what already is. Instead, you begin to embrace one of the most liberating truths in human growth: acceptance. It's the understanding that not everything is meant to be changed, not everyone is meant to stay, and not every question will find an answer right away. Acceptance doesn't mean giving up. It means making peace with what you can't control while still moving forward with grace. People who've walked through loneliness and silence often reach this stage naturally. They've seen life's unpredictability up close. Relationships fade, dreams evolve, seasons shift, and instead of clinging, they learn to flow. They realize that life isn't a straight path. It's a dance between holding on and letting go. Acceptance is the rhythm that keeps them steady through it all. Psychologically, acceptance is emotional freedom. It removes the burden of constant resistance, that invisible war between what is and what you wish it to be. When you accept, your nervous system relaxes. You breathe easier. The mind stops replaying what went wrong and begins to focus on what can be learned. You move from victimhood to understanding, from self-pity to empowerment, because the truth is, peace doesn't come from changing the past. It comes from making peace with it. Acceptance also reshapes how you see people. You stop expecting others to act a certain way, to understand your heart, or to meet your unspoken needs. Instead, you start seeing them as they are, not as who you wish they'd be. And that shift frees you from endless disappointment. You no longer take things personally. You no longer feel the need to fix everyone. You allow people to be themselves while giving yourself permission to walk away when necessary. That's not detachment. That's emotional maturity. The beauty of acceptance is that it reconnects you with gratitude. When you stop wishing life were different, you start noticing what's already good. The sunlight through your window, the stillness of early mornings, the quiet strength you've built through everything you've survived. Gratitude grows naturally in the soil of acceptance, and with it comes contentment, not the kind that makes you passive, but the kind that makes you peaceful. Acceptance also gives your soul rest. You no longer wake up every day trying to fix, prove, or earn. You begin to flow with life rather than against it. You trust its timing even when you don't understand it. And that trust creates a serenity that others can feel just by being around you. Because at its core, acceptance is not surrender, it's alignment. It's saying, I may not have everything I want, but I have everything I need to grow. And that quiet realization turns pain into purpose, chaos into clarity, and solitude into strength. Once acceptance settles into the heart, something beautiful begins to bloom, inner fulfillment. It's the quiet joy that comes not from achievements or approval, but from simply being at peace with yourself. It's the point where you stop looking outside for what was always meant to be found within. This is where the journey of solitude, reflection, and growth finds its deepest reward, a sense of completeness that no one else can give or take away. Inner fulfillment feels different from happiness. Happiness often depends on moments, a good conversation, a success, a kind word. Fulfillment, however, isn't fragile. It's not something that fades when circumstances change. It's the deep contentment that stays, even in silence, even in uncertainty. It's waking up and realizing that nothing external defines you anymore because your peace comes from within. People who have walked the path of loneliness and learned its lessons often discover this treasure. They stop chasing validation, stop comparing their journey to others, and stop measuring their worth by relationships or recognition. They find meaning in the small, quiet parts of life, in their morning thoughts and acts of kindness no one sees, in the simple fact that they are growing